friends, welcome to a brand new series on my channel called Cottage Tales and Book Trails, where I take you along with me as I explore different bookshops in England and across the UK in general. The idea is that for each episode I'll choose a certain area to explore and go on a bit of a bookshop crawl, and I'll share my thoughts on the different bookshops and hopefully have a very successful book haul at the end of each episode. So for the very first episode, I thought that I would stay in pretty familiar territory and start in southwest London, specifically Richmond. So I hope you're all ready with a cup of tea and let's get into the video. To give you a bit of background information about Richmond, it's about a 20-minute train ride from London Waterloo and is home to the famous Richmond Park where deer roam freely. It's historically been a very affluent area, and you can tell from the walks that I go on that the entire town is just gorgeous. Richmond sits on the River Thames, and I believe that the name of the town actually derives from King Henry VII's Richmond Palace that was rebuilt in the early 16th century. Unfortunately, most of the palace is now dismantled, but the name still lives on. But for this series, I thought that it would be fun to have a visual representation of where I'll be exploring, so I've decided to draw a map for each episode, and it acts as a bit of a memento for me as well. So here is the first map. As you can see, for today's book trail, there were 4 different bookshops that I wanted to visit in particular. Now this is usually the bookshop crawl route that I take whenever I visit Richmond, and it seems to work very harmoniously, and I really enjoy the way that the route unfolds because you start off just outside the town centre, and then with each bookshop you slowly make your way closer and closer into the town centre. But the very first stop on the list of bookshops that I wanted to visit was a beautiful bookshop called Books on the Rise. Books on the Rise is an independent bookshop that sits directly on Hill Rise, hence the name, and it offers such a picturesque view of the surrounding area. I honestly like to just stand outside for a good few minutes taking everything in before stepping inside. But as soon as you walk inside, the first block of the shop seems to be made up of literary books and newer titles, and they also had a smaller space inside dedicated to sci-fi and fantasy novels, as well as a couple of shelves of middle grade fiction. One thing that I always forget about this bookshop though is that they actually have a very large open area towards the back of the shop with a wide selection of vinyls, since it also acts as a record shop. And fun fact, I just found out that there's a statue of Virginia Woolf by the River Thames that not only commemorates the 10 years that Virginia Woolf lived in Richmond, but that it's also the owners of Books on the Rise who led a 5-year campaign to raise funds for the memorial, which is amazing. Unfortunately, I didn't know that there was a statue of Virginia Woolf at the time that I was filming, so I wasn't able to visit, but hopefully you guys will be able to when you visit next. But sadly, I didn't find anything that stood out to me particularly, so I did end up leaving empty-handed. But if you're ever in Richmond wanting to support a local business, then Books on the Rise is a lovely indie bookshop worth visiting. Next door, there's also this gorgeous florist called Bramble and Moss that I've always seen and admired from afar, but never ventured inside. So this time round, I finally decided to step inside, and I wasn't disappointed. They have this incredible autumn window display, as well as lots of fun plants and trinkets to purchase, alongside bouquets of course, but I felt like it was a perfect gift shop, and I was very tempted to buy a plant or two, but I knew that I'd be buying books throughout the day, so I had to restrain myself. But next up on the map was the Alligator's Mouth bookshop, which was about a 10-minute walk away or so, and as you can tell, it was a really scenic walk. It was actually quite possibly the most perfect autumn weather that I could have asked for. The sun was out, the sky was the definition of sky blue, and the leaves were falling, so the streets were all decorated with their ember hues. It was so dreamy, and Richmond has so many wonderful alleys to get lost in if you ever have the chance to visit. And I spent some time wandering down Patent Alley in particular. But before I knew it, I was getting closer and closer to my second destination on my map, and it was the one that I was the most excited for, the Alligator's Mouth. If you're wondering where the name comes from, like I did, I believe that it's a nod to Lemony Snicket, who said, "A book is like an alligator's mouth. If you see one open, you often end up disappearing inside." Honestly, that's such a fun quote, and I feel like you sort of understand the atmosphere that the bookshop is trying to create based off of it. But this bookshop is a favourite of mine, and they are a specialist indie children's bookshop in Richmond. The Alligator's Mouth is so gorgeous both inside and out, and they also have the best window and door art display. Sometimes I have friends who ask why I adore reading children's fiction so much, but I believe, as C.S. Lewis said, no book is really worth reading at the age of 10, which is not equally and often far more worth reading at the age of 50 and beyond. So I am a huge advocate for enjoying children's novels at any age. And if you're new here, first of all, welcome. My name is Aya, and I've been an illustrator in the children's book world for the past 4 years now. And so I'm always enamored by the amount of heart and effort that goes into creating a book, especially on the illustrator's part. But the Alligator's Mouth has a really thoughtful and diverse range of children's books, from classics to new releases, but where they shine the most, I think, is their phenomenal graphic novel selection. Often when I'm in bookshops like Waterstones, they'll have a couple of comics and some graphic novels, but the Alligator's Mouth, on the other hand, always have so many graphic novels that I've never seen or heard of before, so it's like a fun treasure hunt for me seeing what they have. You can really tell that the booksellers have such a love for children's fiction. So personally, I feel like if you had time for just one bookshop in Richmond, then I would 100% recommend the Alligator's Mouth. And by the time that I left, I was feeling very inspired to keep on browsing, so I headed immediately to my third destination, which was the Open Book. Now, I think that of all the bookshops that I've mentioned so far, the Open Book is the one that I've seen floating around on social media the most. I've seen quite a few bookstagrammers highlight the Open Book on their reels as a very aesthetic bookshop, and it definitely makes for a very pleasing Instagram photo or reel. I mean, a couple of steps into the bookshop and you're hit with this magnificent hallway of books everywhere. I remember being quite shocked when I first visited the Open Book, and it always takes me a minute to calibrate to figure out where everything is. But of the different indie bookshops that I visited, the Open Book was definitely the most popular, or maybe most well known, I should say. There were lots of people going in and out at any given time, and sometimes there were large groups of people too who were just coming to grab a photo, which, to be honest, made it a little bit of an uncomfortable experience because the bookshop is already very narrow and it's like a one-way system. So I found myself having to frequently step aside mid-browsing, so that's something maybe to keep in mind, at least if you're planning on visiting on a weekend day like I did. So for various different reasons, this wasn't my favourite bookshop personally, but I do think it's worth visiting if you'd like to snap some really wonderful photos and if that's quite high up on your priority list. And last but not least, the final destination of the day was Waterstones Richmond. I was so excited when I walked in to find out that they were offering double plus stamp points. I had no idea this was taking place, but I believe that the event was to celebrate Bookshop Day. But it ended up being perfect for me because I was already planning on purchasing a couple of books that were on my TBR list that I hadn't managed to find in the other bookshops. Now, I will say that it was very, very loud and busy during the hours that I visited, probably because it was a Saturday and it was also the double point special day. So there was probably a lot more foot traffic than there would be on the average day. But I do really love this particular branch of Waterstones, and it's actually one of my favorites that I visited so far. I feel like it's laid out in a very intuitive way, and they also have a great selection of books. I always manage to find something. So I definitely spent ages really combing through every single shelf to make sure that I wasn't missing out on anything, and I made sure to visit all 3 floors. My favourites were ground floor, which has a lot of the fiction in general, and first floor, which was dedicated to children's fiction as well as the sci-fi, fantasy and YA area. At this point of filming, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and all I'd eaten before leaving the house was a bit of leftovers, so I was actually getting very hungry, but I was having the best time. And honestly, I feel like when it comes to book shopping, I can distract myself all day long. But my plan for the next episode is to definitely schedule in a time to just visit a local cafe or something and enjoy some time reading my new books and also getting a few sweet treats in. I also really struggled picking which books to take home with me, and I definitely went back and forth for a good while, but I finally decided on which books to purchase, and then it was time for me to catch the 2 buses back home again. If there's a particular area you'd like me to explore or a certain bookshop that you'd love for me to visit, let me know in the comments below. I might even ask you guys over on Instagram or on YouTube here and do a little poll of where I should visit next. But I hope you guys are really excited about this new series on my channel, and I hope you guys enjoy seeing which books I bought. Hey friends, it's a couple of days after I filmed the initial clips and I'm back in the studio with a steaming mug of tea, and you may have noticed that the setup looks rather different. I wasn't too sure about the previous setup, so over the weekend me and Ian spent a lot of time putting up old posters back up on the wall again. Most of the postcards and wall art are things that decorated my very first office slash studio slash bedroom setup. I really missed the wall art of that particular bedroom and office room that I had, so yeah, I'm really glad that I could almost replicate it in this new house. Anyways, I had the most lovely autumnal day out when I went to Richmond and visited different bookshops, and I did end up picking up a couple of books, so of course I had to film a book haul for you guys. So the very first book that I bought was from my favourite children's bookshop in Richmond, and it's called the Alligator's Mouth bookshop. I had quite a difficult time picking and choosing which graphic novel I wanted to get, but I ended up settling with Garlic and the Witch by Bree Paulson. In this story, you follow on from Garlic and the vampire, and Garlic is having a lovely time spending her days with the vegetable people and also helping out Witch Agnes. But Agnes is trying to come up with a vegetarian blood substitute for the vampire, and unfortunately the ingredients are only available at a magic market that is quite far away, and so Garlic ends up having to go on another journey. The first story was so cozy and precious, and I love getting to spend time with Garlic and the vegetable people, so hopefully this one is just as heartwarming. And I didn't end up buying books from any other indie bookshops, sadly. I just felt a little overwhelmed by the selection at the Open Book, and then what was the first one I visited? Books on the Rise, I think. It's such a charming bookshop, but I feel like the selection wasn't very big, so I did end up not getting anything there as well. So at the very end, I did end up going inside Waterstones Richmond, which is a really lovely bookshop. So the very first book that I picked up is Inferno by Dante. This is one of the books that make up the Divine Comedy, and if you guys have been watching my latest videos, you'll know that I've been spending a lot of time creating my personal curriculum. My curriculum for the autumn term is actually just over here, and it's got all the different units that I'm taking. But one of the classes that I'm taking is catabasis, and for that particular unit I have to read Inferno in order to pass. Now, I was thinking about reading the entirety of the Divine Comedy, but I thought that I would prioritize Inferno first, just because I have quite a lot of books that I'd love to get to this season, and also I thought that this cloth bound penguin edition was stunning, and I've had my eye on this particular copy for a while, so I'm really glad that I finally have it and I was able to get double plus stamp points on it. But Inferno follows Dante as he goes to the underworld or hell, and he is led and guided by Virgil. But I actually just finished reading Catabasis earlier today, and I knew that the book was going to be inspired by Dante's Inferno Inferno. I just didn't realise how much Arifkong was going to reference Inferno, so I'm a little bit annoyed that I didn't read Inferno before Catabasis, but I feel like even reading it now is going to be really interesting seeing where she plucked out different ideas and motifs from. The Divine Comedy as a whole is just a classic that I've been really wanting to get to, so I finally have the excuse to pick it up. Going for a slightly different vibe now. Next up is Shady Hollow by Juno Black, which is a cozy mystery. This was actually one of the books that I was really hoping to find at the bookshops, and I could only find it at the Waterstones, so I knew I had to pick it up. I always assumed that Juno Black was just one author, but at the very front it says that it's the pen name of authors Jocelyn Cole and Sharon Nagel. But Shady Hollows is a woodland community, is a woodland village made up of different animals who live in peace and harmony together. However, one day a toad turns up dead. Now this is something that has never happened before at Shady Hollows, so Vera Vixen, who is a detective, ends up trying to undertake the mission of figuring out what really happened to Toad. I feel like this has been on my autumn TBR for a couple of years now consecutively, so I am so glad that I finally have a copy and I'm gonna try and start it tonight. And then last but not least, I have a hardback. I've got Wild Reference by Rebecca Ross. Rebecca Ross is one of my favourite authors, but I haven't read one of her books in a very long time. I think when I first discovered her maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I was on a huge Rebecca Ross roll. I read a lot of her backlist titles, and I also fell in love with Divine Rivals, although I didn't end up picking up Ruthless Vow, so I definitely need to. But Wild Reference is set in the same world, I believe, as Divine Rivals. This particular copy is the exclusive edition to Waterstones, and it has the most gorgeous sprayed art as well as this lovely inside art as well. Look how beautiful it is. Oh my goodness. In Wild Reference, you follow Matilda, who is the goddess of messenger magic. So her magic involves carrying and exchanging secrets and letters throughout the different realms. But on the other side, you have Vincent, who is mortal, but he's been dreaming of Matilda even though he's never met her in real life, and he's been begging for her help. Unfortunately for Vincent, his prayers went unanswered, and so he lost his faith in the gods until that is fast forward where Matilda ends up bringing a letter to him. I was debating on whether I should purchase this or purchase a couple other books that I was eyeing, but I was at the Waterstones and I decided to try and read a couple of pages just to see what it was like, and I was just mesmerized and captivated by Rebecca Ross's writing, and I was reminded of how lyrical and luscious her prose is. It's rated super highly on Goodreads as well, so I'm really excited to pick it up and start reading it. So those are the 4 books that I picked up from the different bookshops I visited. I feel like they're all really giving autumn, which is exactly what I want. I'm sure I will have mentioned this in the voiceover to the video, but I've been wanting to film this particular book series for a while now, so I'm really excited that I finally get to start. I hope you guys are as excited for this new series on my channel as much as I am, and I'll see you guys all in the next cozy video. Bye friends!